Hey guys, welcome to the Color Me Mike podcast. So just a quick disclaimer up here at the top. Anything said during this podcast only reflects on me and or the guest. Sonity has nothing to do at all with anything that's being said here. Sonity is just a cool boba milk tea shop in Fremont, California that is kind enough to let us record the podcast here at their shop and kind enough to hook us up with some boba milk tea drinks. So everybody just chill and enjoy the episode.
That's the thing
Alrighty.
with these drinks, they're the big straws.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have a choice usually with these, you know. If I don't know if you like boba pearls. Are you much of a boba
I've
guy?
had one boba, I think, in my life, and it was good.
Yeah. Because they usually, like when I started doing the reviews, I wasn't really a big boba pearls guy, so I'd always get it without the pearls. I mean, you know,
What are the
just
pearls?
they're tapioca.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, tapioca, and then depending on which boba milk tea shop you go to, that's where like, you know, you can really see a difference between the quality and the boba pearls itself. Does it actually have flavors or just flavorless? And I'm going deep on boba already,
Yeah.
but you'd be surprised. You know, people don't realize, you know, it's how much, you know, goes into like a boba drink. It's kind of like I review tacos with my buddy Sam. We go around, man, I think we've gone over like 120 different taco spots at this point. It's all over the Bay Area and outside the Bay Area. And people always like ask us, well, how much difference can there be, you know, between tachos?
No,
It's
there's
like,
totally
there's a ton of difference.
subtle to grand. Yeah. totally.
Yeah. But you know, I'm just gonna give a little clap. Gives me something to sync to. Little videography thing. So thanks so much for being here, Dave.
Not a
And
problem.
people who don't know, is we got Mean Dave here. Probably safe. There you go.
Thank
That's
you.
your drink.
Thank you, sir.
It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that you're probably one of the more well-established comics here in the Bay Area, right?
I guess.
Well, I mean, you're in a
When I say
spot.
established,
Yeah.
there's people that know me within our local community. I'm a regular host at the Punchlines in San Francisco and Sacramento and at Cobb's Comedy Club. I run some of my own shows and have for a number of years. So it's weird. It's weird. Like I'll put it this way. I took 2 buses to get here. I might get recognized on the street, but no one offers me a ride. So that's how that works.
No, but I mean, you're in a spot where like people like me who are just how you like your drink, by the way.
It's delicious.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's great.
No, like where you know people like me who are very much, you know, newbies. You're definitely in a spot where we'd like to be. You're past at all the major clubs.
I'm not past at all the major clubs.
Well, most of them.
No, I'm past at the best ones. I'm not past at all of them. I've worked at all of them. Mostly, and that's the thing, is grass always looks greener, especially when you're new. And I've experienced this so many times, and it's funny. It's why I like working with new comics, because you're at the I want to say the most generous of spirit and I kind of take a recovery approach to it. One of the people that is kind of one of the I guess mentors, intentionally, unintentionally in my comedy was Tony Sparks, who is
I met
local
Tony
host.
Sparks.
Yeah,
Great guy.
He is a very great
I
guy.
love his voice.
He ran the open mic at Brainwash Cafe for many years, which was one of the most popular open mics in the Bay Area in San Francisco, and it's where I did my first set. And he was not a fan of my first year of performing there. I don't want to say it wasn't like anything deliberate directed at me. Just, you know, when you see somebody the way that I was going about it, you know, he wasn't discouraging, but he was just sort of like, oh, here's that mean Dave guy again who thinks it's just funny to come up here and be an asshole. That was my character.
Okay.
And because I was translating a character from a music band into comedy, and it wasn't working right away. And I always like to say it was like being a prop comic without my prop of a band. And so, but when I watched what he did over the years, he ended up warming up to what I was doing, because he could see once I performed in terrible places, and I would have better sets there because I seemed to be more in tune with chaos in a room than when there was an actual audience paying attention. Like, I'm ready to hear your jokes now. And I kind of almost resented that attention in a weird way. So it took a while to figure that out. But he watched it, and once he saw me in terrible places and saw that I could get laughs there, he was very encouraging, and he warmed up to me much more. And plus, he was having a rough year too that year, as we learned later. And we ended up not only bonding, and he became the guy who directed me to my first paid gig, which was only $10, but it was still a cool. Hey, $10 was $10 at that time.
It's a paid gig.
And the guy was a friend of mine. He had a sold out show, and I remember I look back on it, I'm like, you could have paid me 20. But it was just one of those things where I look back on a lot of it. And Tony is, he's now somebody who's like a family member in my comedy world. I haven't seen him in a while too. I need to hit him up, but he's somebody that, I look at what he's done for the community after decades of doing comedy and having it go in directions that are not, that don't ascend the ladders of expectations. You know, like everybody gets into this stuff with wide eyes and delusions of grandeur, and I got into this. I got into this mainly like to try and promote a band that then broke up.
Oh wow!
And then I saw that, like, wait a minute, there are people making money at this who are terrible, and I think I could do better in terms of at least making people laugh and coming up with an original character on stage. And I wouldn't mind making money at it, and which I kind of couldn't do in music, because music was something that you can't control those aspects as easily with a band. When you have multiple people, that's something that has to happen organically, and then you have to be in tune with each other in order to, like, not just on stage but off stage, in order to make it work as like with a business aspect. There's so many factors. Whereas as a comedian, I was like, I can control myself, because I did a one-man band for many years, and I realized I made more money doing that. It wasn't like good money, but I made about as much money as a stand-up comedian did. And if I was a little bit smarter about it and didn't do drugs and alcohol at the time as much, maybe I could have figured it out sooner.
Well, growing pains.
It always is, but was part of the lifestyle.
Oh, there's so much to unpack there.
Believe me, I'm nothing but unpacking. I'm a hoarder of this bullshit.
I mean, that's why I wanted to have you on, because when I ended up giving you and Bucci,
we had a nice conversation on the ride home.
Because one of the things I feel like that's missing from the open mic circuit is, because you hear about people in LA or New York or Boston, they're doing open mics at actual clubs where they get to see the more experienced comics go up, and you can talk to them and you can learn. And that's kind of really missing here in the Bay Area.
No, not really. There's those places. It's harder to get that stage time if you're trying to do an open mic at, say, the Comedy Store or any of the, maybe Flappers. You can get on a show at Flappers, no problem. I think the difference with the Bay Area, my dear friend Nina G, very good comic, known her since I started, and she too is kind of somebody who carved her own way in this area, really tooth and nail on her own, and she's not, vetted by any of these forces that are like the comedy validating, like clubs and stuff. She's her own person. She had to be, because she's a stuttering comic. At the time, there were no stuttering comics. She was the only one that she knew of in almost the world. And there's been more since, but she's and she creates her own kind of brand, I guess, if you want to call it, and also is dyslexic and has become a disabilities advocate, all this other stuff.
Oh, wow.
And she's created this whole avenue of stuff. And forgot what the point of what I was bringing her up for.
Because I was talking about how, like, in most open mics I do, I don't really run into people like you who are like, oh, this guy's so experienced. I can learn a lot from watching. So in these other places where they have open mics at various areas, Brainwash was kind of one of those places at the time. And there are, it doesn't seem that way here, but one of the things that she just wrote a book, that's why I was bringing it up, called The History of Bay Area Stand-Up. And one of the things that's a constant about Bay Area comedy versus LA, New York, or any of the places where there's like more, I want to say like mainstream history. This place is a rich history of development of comedy, where people, everybody from Robin Williams, the Smothers Brothers, Lenny Bruce, they all had times here. Phyllis Diller got her start here. Mark Maron, Ali Wong.
Mark Maron, Ali. There's a lot of people that, and the Bay Area doesn't get that credit for being a creative mecca as much as it doesn't appear to be. It always has been this way too, which is, I think, is kind of cool. I think it's cooler than the other stuff because I'm not really attracted to the riches at the end of these, bullshit rainbows, because I know so many people. I grew up on comics that were working on TV, in movies in the 80s and 90s, and they're now just obscure. It's like wrestling, where it's like once you're not on WWE, guess what? You're working the bottom of the barrel circuit you're lucky to make 3 digits in a night, and that's what comedy is very similar, and that's why I kind of like that. I like this bluesy aspect of it. It's why a lot of them kill themselves too, and I'm not. What's funny, that's why I didn't want to do it. I wanted to play in a band because I'm like, bands are cool, man. If they're cooler. You play music. Who cares about making people laugh? Whatever, you make people laugh, it's coincidental. Comedians are desperate to make people laugh. Yet, as I got into comedy more, I'm like, I have always liked making people laugh. I wouldn't admit it, but and that I do search for connection in that. In communicating with people on a humor level. I don't consider myself that funny person, but people laugh at me all the time. So that's when I'm like, and I get resentful. And when I get resentful, people think it's funny. So it becomes this weird push-pull kind of thing. And then it was, I would say, I made myself laugh more when I was doing drugs and drinking alcohol, because a lot of people do that because that's when you're insane. When I got into recovery more, that became lessened, and I became more self-aware of it. And you kind of get into more of a sense of being of service, that kind of thing. And comedy, I look at both as a philosophy and as a job, is being of service, because people do it, whether they pay for it or whether they are just having hard times. It's good to lift people's spirits, and especially in dark times. So yeah.
God, there's just so much to unpack there. You just like
a lot of baggage, man. I told you.
I would say baggage, but just
it's baggage, man.
A lot of life experience, and one thing I do want to ask about is, because it's so interesting. Excuse me, how you got into comedy, where you said you just were doing it to promote your band. You were kind of almost like begrudgingly, I guess I'm going to do it.
It really was begrudgingly.
Do you think Tony Sparks kind of sensed that, and maybe at first that's why he was a little
totally
bit more...
no, you're probably right. No, because the whole thing about, I loved stand-up comedy as an audience member. I miss it as an audience member primarily, because I'm nerdly into it. That's the thing too. I got resentful when I got into stand-up. I was talking to these people that and some of them were working and doing stuff, and I would talk to them about some comics that I would think they would know about from anywhere from the 90s to the 2000s or whatever. They didn't know what I was talking about, and they were even of the age group where they should know. And I was like, how do you not know this?
Who are these names?
I can't. I'm being generalized because I'm sounding like an old man.
And I'm putting you on the spot.
Here's for instance, you probably never heard of a comedian named Alan Havey.
Well, I've heard of him.
You've heard of Alan Havey?
Yeah.
Okay, then you are the first.
Oh, yeah, he's got this one great bit talking about how young guys have a nervous penis now.
Probably.
Boom, boom, boom.
So what do you know? Okay, so you know him from a bit, but what more do you know about him? I'm curious if you know. You know exactly who he is. Holy shit! Yeah, so that right there impresses me more than so much, Mike. Because I cannot tell you. When I met, I'm friends with Alan Havey.
Oh, no way!
He is cool as hell. One of the coolest comics that I've gotten to meet.
Wow.
And the very thing that you're talking about, he was an 80s comic that I watched when I was a kid. And he was one of the names I remember. Him, Rick Overton, other comics that were on TV. They made me laugh. They were on specials and stuff. And I've gotten to meet them a few times. But Alan's a friend,
wow.
And that's it's cool as hell. And I met him at Throckmorton Theater, one of the more popular. It's got a rich history. Robin Williams used to hang out there because he lived in Mill Valley. and a lot of the comics of the 80s, 90s into the 2000s and in current comics perform there, and it pays very generously because it's a non-profit that has quite a rich donor system and all that. So it was like it's always been a very comics are still waiting for it to reopen and become a regular place. And I've had the privilege of performing there, and it's wonderful. Unfortunately I didn't get to. I performed there after Robin passed away, but my first gig there, I didn't know who was on the lineup, and I looked the day of. I saw it announced. I'm like, Alan Havey's on the. I'm like, Alan Havey's on the fucking lineup. Like, I'm now thrilled, and I know that nobody else on the lineup knows who he is except for me. Like, even my friend Nina G didn't know exactly who he was, and so. And I had just watched Hail Caesar for the first time like a couple months before, and he's in it. I'm watching Hail Caesar with my parents. And that's a Coen Brothers movie. It's not it's one that kind of like didn't hit at the box office, although they're always like, critical darlings that never hit at the box office. But I'm watching it, and there's a scene with Josh Brolin where they got all these religious leaders trying to vet the movie that they're making that's about the Jesus Christ, and George Clooney's playing some Roman who encounters him or whatever. And he's like a priest or like a father, a Protestant father or whatever, who's in the room. He's one of the religious leaders. And I'm like, oh my God, that's Alan Havey. And my parents, they saw him back in the 80s. They were there, and they were like, who's Alan Havey? My parents didn't even remember. I was so pissed. And I was like, you would remember him. He was one of the mullet guys back in the day. He had a late night show for a minute too. And so sure enough, when I see that he's on the show, I light up, but I'm also like, and I already have been around long enough and experienced this long enough that I'm like, I'm going to be the only one who cares, except for the people that know him and whatever. And so I get there. I'm about to go on. He hasn't shown up yet, and he rolls up into the backstage area, which is like not away from the green room. Green room's up in the lobby area. So he walks in. And I see him, and I'm like, and he goes, "Oh, hi, I'm Alan." I'm like, "I know exactly who you are, and forgive me, I'm gonna be a little starstruck for a minute." Like I literally told him that, and he goes, "Oh, that's very very nice of you to say." Like, he was super cool. Like, you got that vibe right away.
Well, I'm sure not a lot of people know who he is, to be perfectly honest.
But what's funny is, there's. I wouldn't call them. There's friends. No, there's friends of mine, or they were friends, or whatever. I've watched people turn into egomaniacs over anything from being on a late night show, or just the pettiest of, or having like a few thousand followers on some stupid app. Here's a guy with an actual career who's in stuff and still works today, and he's been in all kinds of shows. He was on Glow, that was popular on Netflix there for a minute.
It's a great series.
He's been like, he's only had one scene, but he's always in stuff, and I keep finding old stuff that he's in too. And it was afterwards though, when I actually got to talk to him in the green room. What was so funny is he's a character, and this is something that I found with all of the comics that used to be that are pros from the 80s and into the 90s. They're truly funny people. Like, there's something different with like this with the. And I think it's something that people need to kind of like rediscover and carry on with. Like, we got all the technology, we got all these other things. I do a joke about this too, about how pranks aren't as good with all this technology. With you got Zoom bombers that are like that bomb Zoom meetings, and what do they think of? They just yell racial slurs and play porn. They don't really come up with cool, funny pranks. Like, back in phone call days, you had to have a funny prank to mess with people, and with like backstory, or just come up with an idea that was kind of clever, or just goofy or something. This, the pranks that you watch people pull today with all this technology are really lazy and shallow and gross, and they're not really that funny. And so and it was kind of one of those things that when I looked at comics from when just hanging out with these guys from like the 80s and 90s, and they're not trying to be funny. Some of them are, but they're really just hearing them. They're just really bent, twisted people that are funny. Whereas when I'm hanging out with a lot of the generations of comics today, they think they're funny when they're like they always want to talk like they're on a podcast because they've heard all of these people doing this stuff, and there's something this kind of weird and too much self-awareness, too much projection. They're not just naturally being themselves, and there's a strange thing to that. And don't get me wrong, there are a few here and there, but I'm still finding like the ones like there's this comic right now.
If you don't have to name who it is.
I want to, and I'm not going to, just out of respect, because I do respect comedy. I would name the person, 7 years ago. I hosted a show this past year, and this dude literally went up on stage, bombed for 30 minutes after, with really just this like aggressive chastising of the city, the people in it, saying that they sucked, that they think they're woke, they're not woke, and like just started being antagonizing off the bat with no real direction of where, like there was no punchlines littered in this. And he got away with it on the early show, but the second show he just came off as super bitter. They weren't into it. They were a cool crowd too. I got him laughing. Other comics got him laughing, but he was really feeling himself in all this, and he just decided to dig himself a hole. He had a 15-minute set. He ended up bombing for 30 plus minutes.
Damn.
Before the closing comic, who was supposed to do 15. Yeah, he was running the light like crazy. I ended up looking this dude up. I'm like, who is this dude that is doing this on a guy's show that I'm shocked my buddy's even letting him do this. And he's a dude, he wrote on a season of SNL. I think he's written for some other stuff. He's more known for actually being asked to leave a show that he was, that's what his primary credit, if there was one, was that he was asked to leave this college or this event that he was invited to perform on. And I was like, and I asked, I was like, why did you let that guy do that? Who is this dude? Like, I get that he's, got some credit BS, but he was up there with like way too much swagger and confidence in something that wasn't there, and he was kind of a dick. He wasn't a direct dick to me, but he was passive. Like, I can always tell when they start making fun of my stage name or whatever without even knowing me and all that stuff. I'm like, who are you? Who cares? Like about my stage name or whatever. Like, so I get a sense of people. That's why I like keeping the stage name, because I'm still defensive, and I want to see you coming as a prick before anybody else does.
What did he do? Oh, Mean Dave. Oh, he's so mean.
He's so nice. No, he's so nice. Everybody's like, well, I don't know why they're calling me a name. I'm like, because you're an idiot, and I like to know first.
That's not even a funny burn. It's like,
it's not supposed to be a burn. It's more just I don't really care. And my joke is that it's short for Meaningful David. I didn't even write that. Somebody else did, but it's more just the fact that I really don't like people. I really don't like anything. I really am somebody that, like, there's a lot more to unpack there that we're not going to, Mike. But
no, not on this time.
So I watched this dude. He's headlining Punchline Sacramento a couple nights. I don't think they're like. He's 2 nights. He's not doing like a 3-night weekend, and they're having trouble finding headliners right now. But he's headlining 2 nights there, and I'm like, why? I watched this dude. And then I was like, well, maybe there's something I'm missing. I checked out some of his clips. I'm like, no, he's the same dick. He's just doing it on popular stages. So I don't get where and why it's because of these followers. It's just I made a post last night that was inspired by this, because I wanted to actually make a post naming them and joking about it, but I was like, nah, don't do that. That's something I used to do, and I don't think it's good hoodoo. But I looked at it like, I made the post. I distilled it down to internet followers are trash comedy audiences, and I do feel that. I feel that, and that doesn't mean that you can't. If you're a follower who's a fan who goes to a comedy show and you like this comic and you follow them, that's different. But if you're one of these people that like, no, I'm a fan of comedy, and you just follow it and you don't go to live shows, you don't support beyond just an occasional, like you just like the photos, or you like the tweets and your follow, and you especially if you interact a lot only in that vein, or on YouTube or something, you ain't really supporting. You're really and there's so many of those numbers are then what builds up and enables comics like him, who are really he's a terrible stand-up comic in my opinion. He can make people laugh. There's a difference between making people laugh and being a good stand-up comic, I think. And he's gotten away with making people laugh with his bullshit persona. I don't think he's a good stand-up comic though.
Yeah, because that makes me think of something that I've kind of observed myself. Because before I got into it, I love listening to podcasts, particularly those of stand-up comedians, because I just always find they have a more interesting perspective.
They do.
I don't need them to be funny, but just when they talk about anything, they have very like interesting observations, really great and like perspective on things. And one thing, like Joe Rogan and his buddies always say is, "No, you know what? Just focus on being funny. That's it. That's gonna be enough." But for me, I know I'm only like 4.5 months in. I personally feel like, no, it's not enough because there's definitely, like you just pointed out, this dude is obviously not funny in your eyes. But
Well, he
yet
makes
he's
people. That's the thing is he's funny to somebody. People are booking him. People, will come to see him.
Exactly, that's the thing. The one thing I
I don't
realized
think
too,
he's funny at all. I think he's an asshole.
Yeah,
literally.
That's one thing I realized. Just because I don't think someone's funny doesn't mean that there's not an audience out there that finds that person funny.
Well, what's funny is we live in a time where, like, when I'm being an asshole on stage, people, you're being an asshole. I'm like, no, I'll show you who's being an asshole on stage, and people think it's cute, and show them this shit, and they're like, well, and they'll try to justify the stuff, and I'm like, I get it. He maybe fits some attractive model or something like that. There's something just really, I just call bullshit on it, and because he's a pretty intelligent dude. I don't know if he wrote for The Daily Show, but he likes to spit out these trivial facts about, because I guess he's semi-worldly. It's not to negate. He has life experience that I think would lend itself more to some aspect of humor. It's really his attitude and his demeanor that leave me to believe like he thinks he's more than he is. And I'd be like, you do yourself more of a service, I feel, if you like, because the way he came out swinging at that crowd was as if he was somebody that like had any business judging any of these people. Now, I can judge San Francisco every day of the week and see them for the pieces of shit people that they are. I still respect them, okay? I respect them enough to where, like, if they're paying to see a comedy show, I'm going to not outright directly say any of my judgment. I will imply it, and I might even state it so long as it works in a joke. And it works in a way that's like, again, I'm aiming for alleviating a factor of that perspective through humor. Dude thought it was funnier, and I get, it's funny because it was a very open mic type of attitude. Like this dude was basically what I see him doing is sophisticated open mic edgelording in the sense that he's like, he's sitting there like, oh, you guys think you're woke? You ain't woke. Oh, you fake ass woke people. And he did that for like 5 minutes. And I was like sitting there going like, what's your point? You're right. Mm-hmm. Is where like now, where's the funny? You know who really is fake ass woke? You. Because you're thinking that you're pulling, like you're lifting some veil of perspective, and you got nowhere. You're going nowhere. You're literally miking it on stage. You're trying to riff, and there's no there in your observation. And so if you think you've got this angle on people, like I got you, and then you show and you got nothing in the bag to unpack, as you like to say. Then what's the point of what you're saying? What he's really doing is taking out his day on these people. And I'm like, and there's a way to do that, again, with your heart in the right place to get laughs out of him. He wasn't doing that. And then he started going into like all this like, just trivia based on his personal experiences. Like, did you know that, I'm like, oh, whatever, man. Like, just shut up. Just get off the stage. You're wasting our time. We got the last dude to go. I'm hosting this. Like, I want to make sure I make the last BART train. Nobody wants to hear you, dude. Like, everybody don't like you right now. And I get, you think it's funnier. It's one thing to pet the cat backwards and bomb in a hilarious way. And again, it's with your heart in the right place. Like, I think, and that when I say in the right place doesn't mean like it's always trying to be. It's got to be funny to somebody. He wasn't like it wasn't even funny to like in that kind of like justified. Let these people know. Dave Chappelle has a great story about Nick DiPaolo. about one of the most hilarious bombs he ever saw, and it was after Nick DiPaolo was on an entertainment showcase following this disabled comic who was in a wheelchair. I think his name was Crazy Legs something or whatever. He's a known, people knew him, and he killed his set. Like I don't know if it was standing ovation, but he got a huge applause break at the end, and Nick had to follow that. And Nick knew there was no following that with his type of, evil comedy that he does. So he just went up there and he did all handicap jokes and had the audience hating him for like his entire set. See, and you just even the discussion of that, that's funny on some level, even though it wasn't funny to those people right there. Okay, that's the deliberate, evil of where that comedy, like, oh, I'm screwed. I'm not going to go down. I'm going to go down swinging the way that's Nick DiPaolo. And if you know Nick DiPaolo, who's now become so consumed with politics these days,
I heard he's
terrible.
Gone off
it's terrible.
rails.
I still think he's a funny dude, but I'm like, come on, dude, like just let go of the politics. Like, not to say you can't talk about him. It's like he's turned into like an Alex Jones character of the Biden stole the election. I'm like, even if he did, who cares? Like, move on. Like, they all steal the elections. So this guy, anyway, so back to Alan Havey. This is how I talk. A lot of acid, folks. Alan Havey in that green room, the polar opposite of this guy that I'm just talking about. Here's a guy who, he was a 80s, 90s professional. He had a late night talk show at one time in the 90s. He's like you just said, he's Lou somebody on Mad Men. That's like his most prominent credit probably to audiences of today. He's been in stuff. He's been in stuff since the 90s. You've watched Rounders. He's one of the pro gamblers in Atlantic City that Matt Damon meets when he's off on one of his gambling trips or whatever. He's been in a bunch of stuff. He was on The Office a few episodes, and here he is in the green room after I met him. He's working on his set. I'm there with Nina G, who drove me to the gig that night, and so we're just hanging out, and Alan asked me, he goes, "Hey, I was just curious, do you know if this is like a clean show or what?" And he's been there before. I don't know why. I think he was setting us up for something. And that's the thing, is he's one of those guys that when he talks to you, as sincere as he is, you kind of feel like he might be like trying to pull a joke on you, which I like. So, but he's sincere as hell. And he's like, "So do you know by any chance if tonight was supposed to be a clean show or whatever?" And I'm like, "I don't think so. I just did my material straight." He goes, "Yeah, I was wondering about that because I walk in and the guy who was on stage when I came in, all he keeps talking about is eating pussy." And we're like, "Yeah, I guess, yeah, just, he goes, "Oh, yeah, I'm just curious, just making sure." And then so we're talking a little more, and then Nina G was saying something, and she stutters when she says the word fuck sometimes, and so she said something and said fucking or whatever. And Alan interrupts. He goes, "Hey, excuse me, you mind watching your language?" And Nina's like, "You were just talking about eating pussy." Like, he goes, "I was repeating what the comic fucking said on stage." It was so goddamn funny. And I'm like, and that's the shit that I've always experienced with, there's good friends with a local legend, if you Larry Bubbles Brown.
Okay.
Another funny guy that I just love talking with. Tony Sparks. Love talking with him, just hanging out. He just says funny, fucked up shit every now and then. Stephen Pearl, that was another guy. He lives in Vegas now, but he was a contemporary friend of Robin Williams a lot. Even like Robin even stole a couple of his jokes that he paid for later.
Kind of Robin Williams is kind of like
he didn't he wasn't a conscious thief. He would grab stuff that might have been in his brain from what he saw his friends, but if you ever called him on it, he always paid you generously for it. That's my understanding of it. And then yeah, just these guys are they're fun to be around. And there's comics that are fun to be around, I feel. There's a headliner, and I will name names. Headliner I got to work with last year, who's a current popular comic, Dan Soder. He's from New York, no, he's from Colorado, but he's a New York guy. Got to host for him. Couldn't have had a better time working with a dude who is a headlining comic at, the top of his game, whatever the fuck. When he rolls into the green room, this dude's talking to me like we're old friends. Like he's just talking to me like a regular. I fucking love that shit. And we got to talking. Turns out he's got family that lives near my family out here in California. His last remaining family, his grandmother, and so yeah, we were just bullshitting. And hilarious dude on stage. Dude, he knows. When we were talking, I mentioned my recovery at some point in it because he doesn't drink. He was asking about non-alcoholic beers, and he's asking if I minded if he smoked weed in the green or in the bathroom. I'm like, you can smoke weed wherever the fuck you want. You're the headliner. Mm-hmm. I'll leave if you need to, whatever. And I said, I'm not bothered by any of that shit. And I appreciate him asking that. But at the same time, like, he didn't have to.
He was just a good guy.
He was a really cool dude and a fun dude to bullshit with. And he's also a fan of stuff. So it was like, he was like 38. I'm 45. So, which didn't feel that way. He felt, at all. Like, I don't feel like I'm older than him. It was plus in a weird way, like when people have real charisma like that, I almost feel like they're, because he's older in comedy years. And I almost feel like there's people that command, people with real charisma and real star quality. You sense it around them. They're fun to be around. These are fun people to be around, even when they're not on stage. And when they're on stage, it's even more amplified. And there are people that I've, that are comics that are, working comics today. And I'm like, yeah, that ain't there.
Really?
I mean, they'll be working people. And I'm like, I got to host for a headliner that I was looking forward to. I almost wanted I asked to host for her. And then when I saw her and I met her and I was like, that's what the movies will do. Like she was in a movie that I liked her character in, and I kind of had a crush on the character more. And when I met her, I was like, you're just like all the comics around here. Like, you're cool, like, but you need that. Like the future was burying her every fucking night.
So what was missing?
I don't know. That's God's blessing. I don't fucking know. I don't. That's the crazy thing about it is I'm not somebody, it's that indescribable thing that I think that they used to talk about back in the day of like, and it's what made people, I would say, if say like, like your Mitzi Shores from Comedy Store, right? If Mitzi either gave you her blessing, which isn't always like just a star maker on its own, but it's like, you gave your blessing to work at the store and everybody worked for that. But she also denied people that it drove them to work harder.
Well, she did in past Louis C.K., right?
There you go. That's what I'm saying. There's people
didn't even last 1 minute.
There's people that she didn't vet who also like it's like it's not a be all end all. But it will determine, like, and I feel the same way. The same can be said. There's people that I know who put way too much on, like, whether you get passed at a club and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, that I get why, believe me, trust me, I get that validation. I've also been passed at a club after I got past the punchline that should have passed me 5 years prior when I took second place in their competition. And they didn't. She was going to put me through, the club owner was going to put me through more hoops that I really felt at the time were like, unwarranted, especially when I saw comparisons to people that she was already letting work there. So I was like, I'm already making money at doing what I'm doing, and I don't feel like it's worth my time investing in trying to work at this club.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up because I definitely don't want to let you go without asking you specific questions because I feel like a lot of people like me who watch this who are newer in the game, there's definitely some things they want to ask. Yeah. So because you've been in 11 years, right?
Yeah.
So since we're
about
talking about
12.
Since we're talking about, getting past and getting booked, I mean, when you're starting out, what should you focus on? Like for me,
focus on your set and getting laughs and getting consistent laughs and go everywhere you can. Go to every open mic you can. Go to especially if it's a room that say you didn't do well in. Don't go back right away, but put a little like I'm going to come back and I'm going to keep coming back and try to develop my set to be better in that room. But it's a lot like my recovery. It's slowly over time. And some people are good at this shit right out the gate. If you are one of those blessed souls, you're going to run into those walls later, because nobody finds. It's like I don't care how good they are to start. they always one of my friends, Sal Trujillo, he was one of the guys that he experienced that where like right away he was funny right out of the gate, kind of got a little ego about it and all that stuff, he admits, and because that's when I first met him, and then I became friends with him later on. We had a nice talk about all that, about doesn't matter how good you are when you start, you're always gonna hit those walls where somebody somewhere is gonna make you work harder for it, or they're not gonna like you no matter how hard you work for it. And it's good. That's why I feel like the way that I've kind of become, what I am, really, all I really wanted to do was just, like I said, make what I can make at a shitty job, which I pretty much do. Sometimes more, sometimes less. Not really less, but that's what I do. As far as set realistic goals for yourself, and it starts with that. You can't just, I watched the stupid movie about those mountain climbers, those soloist mountain climbers. I watched The Alpinist last night. That's so these guys that climb these mountains, it's amazing what they can do. It's also dirt fucking stupid, but it's because one of the things I was watching, it's like he was talking about how, I was getting really heavy into drugs there. I really like the drugs, and then I realized, I'm not enjoying life enjoying these things unless I'm on more drugs. So I realized I had to do something more or whatever, which sounded really cool. And he's climbing all these amazing solo climbs that are just like, oh my God, I can't believe he did that. I can't believe he did that. I can't believe he did that. And everybody's like, yeah, no, I'm worried about him. I'm like, yeah, just like a drug addict. Yeah, that's interesting. And then what does he do? He dies at 25 from one of these climbs that could have totally been avoided if he just would have, been satisfied every once in a while. Be like, yeah, maybe I'll wait to do the next death-defying one or whatever. And I'm like, I wonder if people would still want him around if he just stayed with drugs and became a disappointment like everybody else. And it's like, what's the worst fear? When you say you got to face your fears, I'm like, yeah, now your family's got to deal with, now your mom and your girlfriend have got to deal with you being dead. And there's this movie. Oh, that's a great fucking, here's a nice consolation prize for your life of these incredible achievements that I get are cool in the world of mountain climbing. But what does mountain climbing really achieve for everybody? Nothing. Nothing. Like, we've got helicopters, we've got planes. We don't need to get there. There's nothing going on up there that I get this whole it's an inspiration of all that kind of shit. I'm like, yeah, nah, I don't. Yeah, I'm glad that's a perfect sound effect for that shit. Because it's just one of those things where I'm like, I'm not buying that shit. I when I watch it, it was like, it's just sad because this is like avoidable accomplishment where it would have been more inspiring to see this dude do those things and realize, you know what? I think I'm getting a little out there, a little out of hand. Maybe I need to chill the fuck out. Mm-hmm. And because it clearly was an addiction to some extent. And so when it comes to what you're trying to do, he didn't get to those peaks either like overnight. It was building his skill set to do so. That's what comedy doing the same thing. So it starts with work on your 5-minute set, work on you're just trying to get those basic laughs. You're just trying to get some laughs, get some confidence on stage at the open mics. Treat every open mic like it's a job interview because really those are other comics who eventually are going to, anybody who's going to be sticking around, they're going to be running a show of their own. And they're going to, if you make a good first impression, they'll want to book you. Or they'll refer you to somebody. I mean,
that's exactly what I did. I produced a show on December 22nd, and who did I book?
Yeah,
the comics that I've seen around that I personally like.
And that's how you get better on. Both. It's all do it yourself, man. And that's where I came from, the DIY music scene. So when I got into comedy and saw that the future of this is DIY, it ain't going to be the clubs and all that stuff. Like I can probably even though I was still on drugs at the time, but I realized it's like all of my DIY knowledge is going to probably benefit me later on, which it has.
Yeah, I have to say that's kind of one thing that surprised me when I got into comedy because, I came from the filmmaking videography world and it's very much, there is no set path. You really have to create your own path, right? And I was just from listening to podcasts, I was under the impression that stand-up comedy would be different. Like it would be enough to just be consistently funny, and eventually. But I just
got to figure that out.
It
is enough, but you got to figure out how to be consistently funny, and that's the part that's daunting because You can be funny. Like there's people that I've watched that everybody sooner or later you're gonna bomb. And you got to learn how to bomb. You got to learn how to bomb with grace and bomb, or figure out how to dig yourself out of a bomb, all that kind of stuff. And you don't figure that shit out just from like one time, two times. It takes repeat at repeat. You know, you gotta. And people film themselves. They record their sets. They go over that shit. That shit helps. But that helps as much as like, oh, I should have said this. I should have said that. I'm like, nothing helps more than you have to repeat doing it. So there's a point at which, when people like to do like, a lot of sets in one night, that's when that shit helps. If you're developing your set for something, or you're starting out, that's when you want to do multiple sets. And it's to build your consistency level up so that, I remember when I was doing multiple sets at a lot of open mics in a night, my goal was, to at least, to obviously, make people laugh. Like, but I usually, especially early on, I wouldn't say so much I bombed, because it's like a lot of the times, who knows how many people are in the room. If you got two people in the room, is it really a bomb? I'm not making them laugh all the time or whatever, but then when you have a full room, or there are people there paying attention and they're not laughing, then you're bombing. Yeah, you're bombing. And so you got to learn how to like navigate all those things. And you do that through repetition, and you got to keep trying. Then you got to, what jokes are working? This joke hasn't worked for like, a week now. So we're not using it anymore. We got it. What feels like there's something there, all that kind of shit. You got to really, it's a lot of trial and error. And you're finding your voice. The audience will tell you what's funny. And then you got to consider the audience, because a room full of comics at an open mic, when they laugh, ain't necessarily mean that it's going to make a real audience laugh. That's something too, because a lot of times it's like, there's nothing wrong with playing to the room, but at the same time, you got to consider the room when you start being in actual rooms with audiences that are there to see a show, that aren't just there sitting there on their phones and like, and you just happen to distract them with your twisted nonsense. See,
that's one of the things you told me in that car ride back from Concord that really caught my attention, because my thinking was, because obviously I do a lot of open mics where it's nothing but comics, and my feeling always was, if they don't laugh, it doesn't necessarily mean that this joke doesn't work.
Yep.
Because you know how it is when you're just in a room full of comics, if they're even paying attention to you at all.
Yeah.
Right? But I always figured that if they did laugh, it was generally a good sign. But you're saying not necessarily.
I'd say it's not that it's a good sign. It's a good sign to get comics laugh, and it's early on, because you're just trying to get any laughs. Over time, though, because there's people that are funny to comics that I've watched in front of audiences, they don't do as well. Then that's the weird kind of catch-22, because there's people that are funny to audiences, and then comics may not like right away, and it's like those comics have to be seen in front of an audience for other comics to be convinced. I always felt like I was in that boat, because it's strange how, that's why I'm saying comedians are the worst judges of other people's comedy, and yet a lot of times they play the gatekeepers to like the social circles that allow you to grow.
Well, that's the thing. So like, what's an open micer to do where you're only getting up and using nothing
That's what I'm
but
saying.
comics?
You have to set your own goals. The goal being that it doesn't matter if it's just comics. Yeah, you want to make them laugh. You do want to make them laugh. Once you start, because then you don't get discerning about whether an audience of comics laughing isn't as good as a regular audience. You don't get into that territory until you start becoming consistent, and then you start to notice, oh, this joke made them laugh because they're the twisted fucks at the open mic. But I'm not going to say, I wouldn't dare say that shit at the steakhouse showcase I'm going to be doing next week. Where it's like, just regular working folks and whatever. So it's discerning between those two. And usually people got to find out the hard way. Because I like to think that I had a sense of reading the room even before I learned how to do it comedically. Because just playing the music, being sensitive to a room of an audience and fucking with people and all that. But when I got into comedy, and it's different when the goal is to make them laugh, because you'll be surprised. Like, I've done material that I thought I'm like, this comes from performing in front of a variety of audiences. We used to have a great open mic out here in Oakland called Dorsey's Locker. It was mostly an older black crowd, and they didn't suffer fools there. And it wasn't like what people thought, like, oh, it's a black room. It's like, yeah, but it skews an older black audience, which they're not. It's not like it's not Def Comedy Jam or some shit like that. No, they're just there lounging and chilling, and they've got their issues with the younger folks and whatever. And so, but yeah, as far as it would be funny to, like, when I performed there, and if there was a bit that, like, it was funny to watch what I would try there, thinking that, like, oh, they probably won't like this, and I would, like, let them judge it, man. Who cares? And I would do the bit, and I'd hear laughter, and I'm like, oh, so I'm the one who's wrong in kind of prejudging what they would think is funny or not, based on the fact that I'm not an older black person in this. I don't know that experience per se. How do you talk to people that are different from you? And a lot of comics do not know how to do that when they're starting out, especially. And they still don't. I've seen established comics that, like, goddamn, they still don't know how to talk to strangers. And that's the job. It's hilarious.
Okay, I want to go back to something you said earlier that's very interesting. When we're talking about bombing with grace. So
Yeah.
what would be
Just
bombing with grace?
don't blame the audience. It's
I know
not their
that's
fault.
really big to you. I remember that's one thing you said when
I've seen so many times. Well, that's what that asshole who I'm talking about, who's a working comic, and he's sitting there picking apart. Now, he wasn't even picking apart because that would require skill. He was sitting there like it was the audience's fault that he didn't have jokes at his own show. And I'm like, yeah, your lazy approach is this audience isn't buying it, and they were even calling him on it.
Really?
Yeah, they were saying things back. Wow. Like, he was provoking them to that aspect. This was not a heckler crowd, and that I thought was like, if an audience, it's only the audience's fault if they're doing something deliberate. Okay, you got free reign. I don't get into that either. Like, somebody's like asking for it or whatever. I'm not, even though I have the stage name, people always think that I would love to do that based on the stupid name. And I'm like, I don't like talking to people on, like, especially with, in this trying to be funny, like, oh, I got to put you in your place. No, I don't. I'd rather you just, like, go and jump in front of a bus, Yeah, that'll make me laugh. And see, I don't think it's funny either, but it's funny to me. But there was a guy recently at one of my shows. He was drunk, shit faced. He wasn't there for the show. He was just there drinking. He's a friend of the guy working the bar. And we get to start, and he's like, hey, can I tell a joke? And I was like, no. No, not at all. And I'm trying to do my set hosting the show. And he's not stopping. He's like, oh, you good, whatever. I'm like, I'm just doing my act independent of him. I'm not trying to even make him the butt of the jokes or anything. I just wish you'd go the fuck away. Like, I know you were here. I think you've had your time here. You drank. You did your part. Now, get the fuck out. Like, this is time to go home. Sleep it off. But he's not being completely obnoxious, but he was obnoxious. He was just drunk. And then he's going on, or he wasn't like completely interrupting me, but then he said it one more time. I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. What's your joke? He goes, can I tell? I'm like, no, just tell it to me and I'll say it on the microphone. Like, let me just prove to you that your joke sucks. I think it was something about Mexicans or whatever. And I sit there, I'm like, so I say the joke, and I say the punchline, and I'm like, see? Joke sucks. I'm like, all right. And he was like, oh, what are you doing? I'm like, no. And then they're laughing at that interaction. I'm not trying to make more of this. I was just trying to really just prove to him that, like, look, your joke, however it is, it's not only good. I'm not even saying the joke sucks. It was a racist joke. Sometimes racist humor is funny when no one's else around, no one's looking, and all that kind of shit. It's still a racist joke. It's not good comedy. That's why we laugh at that dumb shit. And I was like, and I just pointed, I'm like, yeah, the joke sucks. and it sucks. I'm gonna make it suck because I'm gonna suck at delivering it. I have a presentation of like, no, I'm just trying to prove to an alcoholic who really should just leave that that really you're ruining everybody's good time that's here for this show. And it was pretty apparent. Like, and then by the end of my set, I saw he was walking right the fuck out. Mission accomplished. Wasn't trying to, and that's not my skill set of like, there's other comics that can do that shit. More power to them, but that's not gonna look good on TV. It's always a strange thing. There was another comic, Sean McKenzie, who had a great joke about how it tells more about the audience when that shit is getting laughs, because it's like the audience just wants to see somebody get shit on. It's strange. It's why I don't like roast battles. It's like, oh great, the bum fights of comedy, where we just want to see people we don't know and never heard of.
That's a
just
great way to describe it.
That's what it's what it is. And I mean, and even roasts in some respect that they're not done with love and knowledge of one another. Like that's. Roasts are, if you look at all the good roasts of the past, I'm not talking about the Comedy Central ones, but
you're talking about
Dean Martin, the classic ones. Those are people who knew each other, who had love for each other, and knew each other's numbers, and and those jokes worked. And they had that camaraderie. That's the point.
It was clear that there's a relationship there, and there's a huge difference when it's buddies making fun of each other.
It's not the same.
It's like if you ever watched the Chevy Chase roast on Comedy Central, where there's a bunch of people that had no connection to him at all. He wasn't even looking at them.
You see it. You see like the awkwardness and the. I remember one of my favorite jokes that was not good. That clearly was just like, oh. Like, Jesus, somebody's just trying to get a gig. Was Amy Schumer trashing Steve-O for not being the first dead one right after Ryan Dunn got killed? And I was like, oh, that was fucking class act, Amy Schumer. Fuck yeah, way to go. Hope you get that next gig. Like I was like that, and that's that typical like. Again, that's what I look at today, and I'm like, and it's not like I think it's always been that way. I don't think that like anything's changed. I think the technology, all this other stuff, may make it seem so. It's always been that cutthroat. I also became friends with the '80s pro Rich Scheidner. He was a guy. He did comedy that was like kind of comparable to like Tim Allen back in the day. And we're friends with him. He wrote a book, or not wrote a book. He wrote a book. No, he did write a book. I forget the name of it. I have it. I forget the name, but he's also doing this this performance that's a history of comedy type thing. And we just saw it recently because he's going to be wrapping it up. But it was funny because just in talking to him and reading his book, these things have always been there. It's just the numbers have grown. And the avenues of how you can kind of make your living have grown. And you can be a pro and be fairly anonymous these days. And there were less people doing this shit and wanting to do this shit back in the day. So
it's kind of overwhelming, the amount of people trying to be comics.
It seems that way. And it can. That's if you're trying to do this, I think. But it's a buyer's market in terms of, hey, you want to be entertained? You got all kinds of people trying to entertain you at the local level, to the internet level, to the TV and movie level. You got so much to choose from. And that's why I'm like, okay, so then you got people, it's balls in their court. They wield all that power, but it's not the same. Like, just because you could have, there are people that have been on TV that I've known who've done comedy and all that kind of shit who will never have as many followers as Butt Cheeks do. All right. And I follow, you follow me on Instagram, go ahead at mean_Dave, and you look at who I follow. I follow the best in thick Instagram thirst traps. Okay, top notch quality. I'm telling you, man. Like, everybody tells me that's one of the things. I remember when like the whole point of being on social media, in my opinion, was like, to follow people that whatever. I follow, porn stars and then this whole other avenue of internet thirst traps, all this other shit. Because these are women that would never be interested in me on a personal level. So I could just admire their pictures and whatever, and that's about it. And then people started shaming. You've like, see that Dave follows, all these chicks. Where I'm like, yeah, so what? They're like, yeah, well, you're liking all their pictures. I'm like, yeah, that's the point of social media, dickhead. Like if I was going to the strip club, I wouldn't be like hiding in the back like no one will know that I'm really perving out here and all these things if they don't see me getting lap dances. I'm like, no, I like, so what? And it's like, call me old fashioned. I believe, you should like a Thirst Traps picture if press the like button or whatever. I don't give a shit. And it was just so funny to me that like that then they're trying to label you a perv. I'm like, no, a perv is somebody who like is on a bus who's like following somebody with like a camera phone trying to look up dresses and shit. I'm like, no, these are women that are clearly looking to exploit attention from people just like me, and I am willing to be exploited in that regard. I'm like, this exactly. Yeah. That is a completely consensual relationship, and you're the perv, really, who's watching me watch her. Okay. So that's
we're coming up on 1 hour. There's one thing I definitely want to hit before we end. Is another interesting thing you mentioned in the car. You have a very interesting perspective on the whole system at the Punchline, where you sit, or you just basically do a meet and greet. You sit around and wait. You don't know if you're gonna go up or not. And your view on it was you don't really want to start going there until you
feel confident in your set.
You're killing like 80-90% of the time.
Killing is a word.
What they're doing, getting laughs.
You're getting laughs. You're consistently. Yeah, 80, I don't feel. Most of the people try to go, and there's people that even get on that stage on the rotation on the Sunday showcase, and I'm like, you're not going to work there. Like I kind of already know after time. And I know too much about their system there now, but I don't think there's any point in going there and putting anything on the Punchline or any club in general if you are not focused on being consistent in all of the worst places to do comedy at its start. If you can't consistently do well in the worst rooms at a 5-minute set level, meaning like getting attention of bar drunks and rewarding it with laughter and trying to figure out all those little weird little pockets of comedy kind of obstacle courses. There isn't really much of a point. I mean, there are people that can do well out the gate to a club audience, and I don't know how that is. I don't know how that feels because that's not my experience in doing it. And anybody who experiences that is, I mean, I've known people that have done that, and a lot of them quit.
Really?
Because then when things start getting tricky and difficult, and things aren't easy and laid out for them, and not only that, this is a long Cameron Esposito. If there's a show that was on Amazon Prime. There's a guy that I know who's in it, Kellen Erskine, he's a guy from around here. He'll be headlining actually. So there's a headliner that I do salute as far as he deserves to headline. He's a great comic. He's probably one of the best of the generation that I saw that was around when I started. I'd see him at mics and stuff. He actually gave me one of my early compliments at a clean open mic we were doing in San Jose. He was like one of the few other people in the audience, and he saw me get laughs in front of this, like a sparse audience that, some people, the thing is like, my goal was like to make people laugh in those tricky places. A lot of people just go up there. They just want to do their written jokes or just do their set the way that they see it in their mind. You got to go into these things like, don't have any expectations and kind of be in the moment up there. Like even when it's acting. Like you have your written material and all that kind of stuff that goes out, the plans are what you make when, life's going on kind of shit. Like you can plan all you want. What you want to be prepared. Yes, be prepared. Preparation is excellent. But when you're on that stage, all that preparation goes out the window. And like Bill Hicks said, material is what you use when you can't think of anything funny to say. Mm-hmm. So, which is 90% of the time when you're on stage. So you want to be prepared. But the only way to find out if that material is funny is through trial and error. So we're at the hour.
No, keep going.
But it's one of those things where I look at. So there's no point to me if you to try and get on that punchline stage if you don't feel some level of confidence in yourself. Like by the time I got up there, I watched so many people put in time to get on that stage, only to do mediocre sets, which I think is worse because then you're establishing in the minds of the people of the booker staff or whatever that you're okay, which you don't stand out. That's not good.
Yeah, that's also interesting because you felt like you're actually better off bombing than just doing just okay.
I don't want to say you're better off bombing. I would say like bombing is not as bad as being just okay. Mm-hmm. If you're bombing, at least you're standing out, but it's not a good standout. Mm-hmm. But it's more important to me. It's like when I got on that stage that night, it was after also some research watching, because that's why their system, if you take advantage of their system the way that they have it set up, it's set up to be like, pay attention to the show, watch the show, learn how it operates, learn how because it's like being a surfer reading the breaks and like the way these comics go up there in their first year, second year without any consistency. That's like going out to go surf big wave surfing after you just were in a wave pool. You don't know shit, man. You're gonna get crushed. And the fact is, you want to kind of watch how the show is operating so you kind of read the breaks and kind of get a feel for how the show works. Stay there to the end. Talk to people, learn, even when it's uncomfortable. Yeah, we're all social, fucking awkward and all that kind of shit. So fucking what? You want to work in this business? It's only going to get more awkward. It's only going to get more insecure and all that shit. So it's like there's so much that is going against you that if you really want, and I've watched so many people do that shit, and I'm just like, all right, there goes another. I can't wait to see this other wave of disappointment that's going to come through. And then even when you get past, or if you get an audition, you get past all that kind of shit, it's just setting yourself up for the next level of disappointments and the next level of disappointments. This is a slow grind. And I was saying, Cameron Esposito said this, was telling one of the comics who was not. Who was rejected for Just for Laughs for the fifth time or some shit. She was saying this is a long game. And she started illustrating some of her experiences and what it is. And she's absolutely right. And it's like, play your game. It's not a competition, man. Don't compare yourself to others, but compare yourself to yourself in terms of your laughs, your sets, what you really. I just did a show with a really good new comic, and I kind of paid her the same compliment I paid you from Vinny's. Her name is Ashley Monique. She's very funny. She's one of these people that's kind of funny out of the gate type, but she's also from Sacramento, which is a really good place to they have a really cool supportive scene, I feel.
Yeah, I've
out there.
That.
Yeah, I really like the comics, the new and the older comics that are still around there. Just like any other scene. There's a few handful of fucking, whatever people, but she was really cool. I'm just meeting her, and I liked her, and I think she did Vinny's before because a friend of mine brought her, and I can tell, I'm like, oh, she's one of these girls that's gonna be that people will like. They like her, and her jokes. She's smart, so she'll figure out her jokes as she's going along. And I heard she had a really good first set at the Punchline in San Francisco not too long ago, which that's again good. Especially for being she's somebody who kind of defies that rule that I'm saying, but I think she has a level of confidence in herself that worked for all of that. But we were at a club, it was kind of audition-ish, but we were doing this thing at a club on Wednesday, and I knew she was going to be disappointed in her set. It was a small turnout audience, so that's it was enough people there to get laughs, but it was a small turnout audience, which can be a little intimidating. She was pretty nervous, which again doesn't help all the time, but it's it's good to be nervous. Don't get me wrong, but I was a little nervous, but I've been around longer, and so she got some laughs. But the thing that she did from listening to her, I was in the green room, but I could hear her set, and I'm like, she's not getting too many audible laughs from the back, but I'm hearing some laughs here and there. And I knew she wasn't going to feel good about her set. I just knew based on knowing her or whatever. And when she got off stage, I said, "Great job," and gave her a pound. She's like, I'm like, I get what you mean. I'll talk to you later, whatever. And I didn't get a chance to talk to her. There were comics around when we talked later. And so I messaged her what I told her or told you. I said, I said, I want to let you know something. You did a great job tonight, and it's something that only other comics who are smart can. But I've had people tell me the same thing. You handled your set complete like with grace, meaning that there's people that in comics at all levels that if an audience is not doing what you want, have you ever had a date go wrong, or you go on a date with a girl and like might even be a good date, but then when you go in for the kiss or whatever, she backs away or whatever, does it help you to get mad at her? No. No, it ain't gonna. No, you just take the L and take it with class if you can. All right. These dudes or these comics, not just dudes, women too, they just start turning into date rapist energy. Just said, "Oh, you're not gonna laugh at that? You ain't gonna whatever? Well, then take this." And then they start getting all upset and you get whatever. They start looking like a brat up there, and I'm like, "Oh, sorry, it didn't. This wasn't the set of This isn't the night. Your night or your set of the night. Whatever the fuck." She did her material. She did not comment on the responses to the jokes. And if you are gonna I do jokes that are inspired. Like if I don't get expected, I got some lines for that kind of shit. But I respect the audience to the point where if I'm doing a joke and they don't laugh at something, I'm like, cool, you agree with me now, because I don't think I'm all that funny. I just think that I've got some bullshit that works. I got some things that I really feel that are from the heart that are inspired, but those jokes tend to go into areas where I got to be careful because audiences today now, they are more touchy, and I respect that too. I'm not sitting here saying, "Oh, PC culture." Nah, man, it just makes you have to work harder and smarter to find new and innovative ways to offend people without them realizing it. That's if that's your goal is to make edgy jokes, and that is true. That like comics, and the other thing too is it's funny to watch comedy cannibalize itself, where other comics are thinking it's bad to be edgy. Like I'm like, yeah, that's kind of the fucking point of a lot of comedy, dickhead. Like to find, I'm sorry, not everybody's Seinfeld, and even you pick on Seinfeld. What's this sweet spot, this G spot of comedy that you're looking for? That's not trying to be edgy, but not trying to be so fucking mundane. Like, does everything have to be about your dating apps and Uber or whatever the fuck is your current lifestyle choices? I'm like, there's something for everybody. And there's people that like to hear foul mouth, seemingly offensive stuff, and there's people that want to hear cookie clean cutter comedy that they could change a diaper in front of and shit. But to think that like everything has to suit you, and that's the thing with going to a comedy show these days. There's people that go to I don't understand the audience that goes to a comedy show that doesn't know who's on the show. One of my favorite times watching a show with Bobby Slayton. Do you know who Bobby Slayton is?
No, I don't know Bobby Slayton.
That's amazing that you know who Alan Havey is, but you don't know Bobby Slayton. See, there's that comedy history. He's from the 80s and 90s, was known as the Pitbull of comedy. He's a New York Jewish guy who is just he has a voice like this, just completely abrasive, loves to say all the words that will offend everybody or whatever, loves to say all the slurs, all whatever, and he's funny dude. He's a very funny dude, but he's kind of, the way that he comes at his set sometimes is a little dated, because he's a smarter dude than his set will let him, that his set implies. And if he came at it from if he kind of just, it's like, yeah, if you just came at it from these angles, you would win a crowd over more, because they know your heart's in the right place before you have to bust out the unnecessary N words and whatever else you want to say to prove that words are just words. Because I do subscribe to that. I don't think it's okay to say slurs under any circumstances unless you're, trying to make a point about something that or whatever. But at the same time, I grew up in the age where, when I hear a slur, sometimes it makes me laugh, whether it's appropriate or not. It's just, I grew up with being called them. It's okay. I'm not that bothered by it. I mean, I don't want to be sitting there. I've been called a beaner, wetback, all the list of whatever. I've been called the ones that I'm not even of. I've been called the F word, the N word. I've been called all of them, and yet, it doesn't make me think it's okay to say them, but it also doesn't make me afraid of these words. But I do know they're loaded words, and I have jokes around that. What was my point?
Well, you know what? I'm going to have to cut you off here anyway, because I got to pick up my next guest. I definitely want to have you back on. There's so much to talk about.
We'll pick up at slurs.
Yeah, I know. So Mean Dave, can you say your social media and how people can find out where you're going to be
I
performing
don't want you
comedy
to follow
next?
me. You heard what I said. But I'm telling you, if you want to find the thick thirst traps, at mean_Dave on Instagram. I'm also, people ignore me the best on Twitter at mean Dave time. You can find me there. And then if you want, I'll be picking it up again. I make a YouTube show called In the Meantime with Mean Dave on YouTube, and that's at youtube.com/the THEE explainer, as in the explainer. As you can tell, because I explain a lot. And then, other than that, I don't know, come to a local show. I run shows at Lily Max in Sunnyvale, at Murphy's Law Irish Bar in Sunnyvale, at Vinny's Bar and Grill in Concord, and occasionally at Aloni Cigar Lounge in Fremont. I do also run a show occasionally or once a month at Branham Lounge, but that might be on my chopping block because that place has become quite. I love the bar, love the staff there, love our audiences that go there. I hate their regulars. They're regular people. They're football fan bar regulars are the complete pieces of shit that you never want at a comedy show, and I have no problem saying that publicly. So.
Well, there you have it, folks. Yeah. And you have it from Mean Dave himself. I take those L's on stage, but I take them with grace.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I wish I knew my train of thought on those slurs. God damn it. I do not know what I was talking about.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Can't wait to find out.
Hey, guys. So thanks for tuning into the podcast. And a big thanks again to the fine folks at Sonity for letting us record the podcast here and for hooking us up with their delicious boba milk tea drinks. My wife, Chris, and I review boba milk tea spots all over the Bay Area. Believe me when I say that Sonity is definitely one of the best boba milk tea shops around. Make sure to follow them on Instagram at SAN as in Nancy, and as in Nancy again, A19, that's sana.na19 on Instagram. And if you're listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, make sure to hit that follow/subscribe button and make sure to give us a 5-star rating to give us some algorithm love. Okay? Thanks for listening.